So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pretend like we just had this idea that we need a virtual machine. We need a Windows server for some project. And so let's see how long it actually takes from the idea to getting one. So I hit the stopwatch start. Now I'm not going to basically teach you or talk about exactly what I'm doing here. We're just going to pretend like we just had this idea. So I'm going to call this new idea. In this course, we're obviously going to get into how to create a virtual machine and all the wonderful stuff around that. I'm going to pick a bit of a bigger machine. So we're going to get the D4 machine. We'll use, we will get a Windows 2016. To give it the administrator user ID and password. I'm going to want to RDP into that box. I'm going to skip all the other options. It's offering me this machine at 16 cents Canadian per hour. And if I just click create, let's see how long it takes for Azure to actually make it. And I should say one of the cool features here is we can actually watch it in progress. So creating a virtual machine is not just, oh, we just need a machine. We also need a network. We need an IP address, security group. And right now we're getting storage created. So, you know, that's all the things that are involved in creating a VM. All right, so right around the 5-minute mark, it says my deployment is complete. I can sort of open it up and see that this has, in fact, done its work. Going to the resource within the portal, I'm going to minimize the menu here. We can see that we have a virtual machine running. It's given me a public IP address. And so theoretically, I can use RDP, the Windows Remote Desktop Protocol, to get access to this machine using this IP address and the ID and password that I gave it. So let's go back to the stopwatch here. So 5 minutes into it, and we have a machine for use. Now, as you know, the first time that you run a machine, it takes a few seconds to start. So let's go into the connect button, click the RDP file. The RDP file comes to my local. I click connect. Remember, I created a specific account for this. I set this when I created the VM. I'm going to say OK. I have to accept this certificate. And now RDP has started. And so now it's going to take a minute or two for Windows to configure itself. And I'm going to create a profile for myself. And we have to configure this for a particular role, etc. The server is just going to be empty. It's just as if you installed a brand new version of Windows on a server that you have direct access to. So at this point, there's not really useful until I make it do something. But the point is, within 6 minutes of deciding that I wanted a virtual machine, I am here looking at the home screen of this brand new machine. And it's in a second going to pop up with the, do you want your PC to be discoverable? Say no. It's going to pop up with the role manager here, and we can decide this is an IS machine or a file server or some other purpose for it. But yeah, basically this is just a demo of how quickly you can decide that you want resources. So let's get back to this sort of high-level overview of Microsoft Azure, of cloud computing. We've seen how powerful it can be. Microsoft Azure first came out in February 2010 to the public as Windows Azure. And in 2014, it was renamed to Microsoft Azure. 54 regions around the world, and that is the most of any cloud provider. So comparing, even AWS might have bigger revenue and a little bit bigger market share. Azure has sort of established the investments in the buildings and the wires and the computers and the locations, exceeding even Azure in that respect. They've got data centers and regions in India, the Arab Emirates, and even in South Africa. We can grab this map. Microsoft has the Azure regions page on his website, and it's always updated. There's always being regions being announced. So those 54 regions means that it is sort of looks pretty well spread over the globe. Of course, there's concentrations in North America, concentrations in Western Europe, Asia, but it's starting to establish itself more in places like Australia. We saw the Indian and UAE. There's a single region in Brazil, and I'm sure that's going to grow. And South Africa is a recent announcement too. So these are all sort of growing over time, and that's a lot of investment there. Now, you might see that number 54 and you think, wow, I'm going to go into Azure and I'm going to create a server in, imagine, a region. Not all regions are available to all customers. So there is the public cloud. So we'll be talking about the public cloud mostly in this course. But let's not forget there are 3 individual government clouds for the US. The German government has its own, not the German government, the German population has its own cloud for German citizens, and other restricted regions. So we'll talk about these terms. You might hear public and private and hybrid when it comes to cloud. Public cloud essentially means it's available to anyone. Anyone with a credit card can just sign up, maybe even takes a few minutes to create an account. Out of those 54 regions that I talked about, 28 of them are available for anyone to create. There are some restrictions, an additional 6 regions that are technically public, but you can't just go and create a resource. You need to qualify. There are some minor differences between the regions. And so you might really want this really powerful GPU server and series CPU that has GPU capabilities, and that might only be available in some regions. So depending on the type of resource you want, you may be restricted to some regions and not others. Generally, most content is available in all regions. One thing that happens with data is it becomes very sensitive as to where data is stored. And I noticed that Azure does a pretty good job of respecting national boundaries. And so if you're getting your data into Canada, the Canadian regions, well, the data stays in Canada. Data in France stays in France. Data in the UK is basically stored and stays in the UK, etc. So they do a pretty good job of respecting those national boundaries, because the way that data travels over the world has become sensitive for certain industries. Now we're talking about the other cloud. It's the government cloud. They have their own URLs even, right? It's not the same as the Azure public cloud. 8 regions currently, and even within that, it's fractured between the US governments, like the federal, state, and local, which goes into one, and it even has its own like defense network and the secret network, I guess, is for the spies. And so you can't just get a virtual machine in the public cloud connecting privately over Azure into a virtual machine in the government cloud. There is restrictions. There's completely separate networks, not connected in any way. Germany has one of the toughest data protection policies. There's even a data trustee. And there are, when you're creating a machine or creating data, you're going to have certain subtle differences between that and regular Azure. And so it's considered its own cloud as well. There are 4 regions in Germany. Now you may have heard, so that was the public cloud, right? Anyone can sign up for those things. I mean, even the government, if you qualify, you're a state government or you work with them, you can sign up. Private cloud, those are clouds that do have those restrictions. So the Department of Defense, like you can't just get your credit card and sign up for a DoD cloud, right? So those things are private. You can even download what's called Azure Stack, install that on your own hardware within your own data centers, and you would have Azure effectively running within your own data center, and you can take advantage of those commands. I just showed you how to create a container. Well, you could do that on your own hardware in the same sort of manner with Azure Stack. I know that it's been introduced a few years ago and is slowly gaining some speed, and they're talking about re-architecting it now. So I wouldn't put a lot of investment into Azure Stack right now. It's definitely Microsoft's trying to find its place for it. You can also have, it's sometimes called the internal cloud or the corporate cloud. Like if it's a network that's just for the employees of your own company, that would be a private cloud. The other term you might hear is hybrid. And so that is the combination between some sort of public cloud and your own network. So it's used in a lot of places. Basically, it's a combination of your own private software, hardware, applications, and the public cloud. So you can have your primary data center in your own premises. And then if there's a disaster, you have the backup ready to go in the cloud in case of a disaster. So it's not used except in the case of emergency. Your SQL Server has the extension option where you can push data from a local SQL Server into the cloud, take advantage of the cloud storage. There is the opposite where you can have Azure public services connecting to private services in your network through a gateway relay, any kind of mix and match between public and private.